Oh, so we're back to the uh, classic series. I was intending to conclude everything here. And the purpose behind these installments is meant to address certain problems that I think when you look at them collectively, you start to really get out of this idea that we live in some, decent, peaceful type world. And what I find most discomforting is that more often than not, when I'm just going through the day to days of life, there are multiple people who will say, "Oh, you have bright sun outside," for example, Mr. Envoy, and that may be true, but there are just places where issues persist in spite of how decent it is where you live. Someone who, for example, is in Washington in some uh, wonderful, extravagant house doesn't know what it's like to be on the you know concrete of some department store parking lot in one of the American inner cities as a result of wealth disparity. I always says I was catching up with today's earlier stream regarding death. Hey, you'll be able to catch up. I'm going to try to run through several things very quickly, or not necessarily. I don't want to repeat of the second installment of this series. So I have in the past talked more readily about problems afflicting African Americans. And now, if you turn on the news or go to a lot of these other places, just various channels, we're not going to mention any names, but they will make it seem as if, and this isn't just, actual African Americans, it's news groups, quote unquote, advocacy groups. And one of the things they've tried to preach to people is that the main plights of blacks have to do with police brutality, and that's about it, or some sample of racism. And look, I have stated before that that is an issue which will never be in and of itself completely absolved from existence, and that still can impact people from here to there. And there are many times where I've actually withdrawn from talking about a number of these different incidents because I just don't feel like having the headache of having someone come on there and try to argue back and forth with me in the comments section or some other place, as we saw in the past installment. But the thing that gets me is that I looked up multiple things, right, that I felt blacks are more bothered by. And, one of the people said, why bring up, I don't think will ever be truly, yeah, well, it has to do with the fact that people are, look, we can't claim a window into someone's soul. The highest extent I would care is if they're actually doing things to people, not giving you a job because of ethnicity. But, if they're just saying the N word in the dark and they're not going out and lynching people and actually doing things that are discriminatory in their practice, I'm fine with it. Again, there's a difference between racism and effectiveness with that prejudice. And I'd hope people would recognize that. The worst thing about it is that it's learned behavior. You're taught it, obviously. And look, we can go into that in a separate stream, but I wanted to address several of the issues I've had with just how things are. So, one of the sources I was reading earlier today claims, and this is from the DOJ, it's this paper, it's about African American women. It's saying that almost 30% of them are victimized by intimate partner violence in their lifetime, and they have a higher rate of partner violence, a 35% higher rate than that of Caucasian females, and about 2.5 times the rate of women of other ethnic groups. Now, I mentioned a while back that in my issues with the current relationship, and I bring up in this instance black women just because that's typically what I've gone after as someone of that ethnic group. We already know when you're of one group, you tend to go for people of your group. That's old news. And look, my point was always that you know these people try to tell you it's because of the system, it's because of suppression, the pipeline, whatever. But ask yourself this: What system of government causes an individual to decide for himself to put his hands on someone, maliciously and not in a self-defensive way, as is being claimed here? That's what, yeah, victimhood mentality. But ask yourself that if it is truly the system's fault for why people engage in behaviors that are deviant, why do you have people who are able to escape it? If this is just automatically because you're this group, you're going to have this happen or become this way. To harm another, yeah. Uh, personally, I think that we need to again. When I preach self accountability, I get told that that's hogwash and sacrilege. Um, and there's a dirty little secret about domestic violence, which is in a lot of cases you have people who go back and forth, and someone puts their hand on the other person. The other person, if they're bigger and stronger, just takes it to a whole other level, while still being based around the fact that the other person touched them first. You can't entirely, make it seem as if the individual was just malicious and decided to go and attack someone, which still happens. But I'm saying that there are other instances where it's not always the case. Voices I've heard many crabs in the barrel. Yeah, I would totally, I've heard the same words. Um, but when I was sitting here and I was talking about the problems that I think afflict them, and it's part of the reason I just want this to be the beginning of, so maybe the first 20 minutes of the stream. I looked up many issues that I thought were big problems, the incarceration rate, which almost half of which, not 50% exactly, but it's about 48, 47, is from drug offenses. Um, and obviously someone can make the case of they shouldn't go to prison for violating the three strikes rule and all those stuff. And I support changing those laws. The problem is to go about changing those laws, because they differ state to state more often than not. One would have to take the time to open a book or go on the internet and look up, what is my state's policy on marijuana or something else. Not every state is Colorado, which I think a lot of people only know because it legalized marijuana before anybody else. But those are things that can be fixed through participation with government. I've noticed a running theme where it seems as if when you talk about other problems afflicting blacks or African Americans, you get this kind of insurgent anger. How dare you bring this up? And when I mentioned the bastard children thing, or the children born out of wedlock, it was to the note that we have gone through decades of a majority of motherhood rule or female rule, and it's proven that you need both parents. Um, and it's not to say that every single time the person's going to turn out to be whatever, but it's to suggest it's been proven in the past that when you have both parents available, they're able to typically do a better job than one. And it still also depends on who the parents are, but that's a subject for a whole other stream. We could sit here for 30 or 40 minutes talking about that. But to go into other issues, you have the 1 in 5 getting a degree by 25, 4/5 of the women being overweight, which is a health issue that, again, I still can't figure out how anyone but the individual would control that. How dare you look within your community and bring up issues that you wish to resolve? How dare you try and make us better? It's everyone else's fault. Yeah, it seems like it. Um, And look, I'm not saying that there aren't systematic ways in which people are engineered towards certain things. I can fully comprehend where a male, might want to act like his mother, for example, because that's the person he's been around. Um, which a lot of times people say that's why people respond with emotion rather than logic, whatever. But how much is too much? Um, I ask yourself that for the mentioning of the health issue. What is supremacy or any of these other groups, discriminating, doing to make people, you know, get massive? I'm just saying it seems like something that could be solved within the group. Um, Really, I just think the only way you're going to truly fix this is if you have some kind of insurgent campaign where someone would have to just do something completely radical in terms of relocating them to various places, getting them out of these inner cities. It would take it takes more than one person. What I'll probably do is put out a proposal. What I would do, an actual some long term, just decades long plan of how to somewhat correct this or make this a little bit better. But remember, the scariest thing in the world is that it takes long time, more often than not, to build something, but to destroy it, it can literally be a matter of moments. Um, and that's just the way it is. But I really find it sad as I sat here and rewatched the other stream where the person talked about the uh, lack of, and I'm going to respond back to what Envoy's saying right now, but just make this point. The person mentioned, when I mentioned that we should also have protests for the black on black crime, the person questioned the effectiveness of this after saying that the protest over police brutality had been effective. So he's essentially saying that what was, and also claiming that part of the reason for the enhanced focus on brutality was that it was harder to take down a system of government rather than loads and loads of criminals, given the alarming rate of these homicides. So he's effectively saying that the strategy which worked for the bigger threat, for some reason, somehow, some way, won't work for the smaller one. Again, these were his words in that stream. Um, and it's when you hear things like that, it really it made me question why I didn't disengage earlier. But I always have that naive hope sometimes, admittedly, that people, if you sit them down and try to talk with them about something and espouse some view that has some backing in fact, or at least tries to question some stance they're putting forth that is opinionated, where it might not entirely be the case, they might come around to seeing what your point is, even if both of you don't agree or shake hands. At the end of the day, it's still an attempt to understand the plight of the other person, which I just think at this point I've lost a lot of patience for, because I keep saying, there will never be another stream like that one again. We're not doing that one. I know one person will get that joke. He just can't comment right now. Uh, but yeah, to fix the plights of the community, I would have to make a probably some lengthy document and just read off that script and put some presentation together. And because I have made several ideas, and more often than not they have some statistic that can go along with them. So for example, if I were seeking to alleviate the black on black crime, because a lot of people will say, oh, it's because they're around each other, and people who are within a group are more likely to do something to each other than other groups. Separate them, put them with their siblings and parents, and just haul them over somewhere else. If they can't be around each other without having some go out and act violent. Because here's the thing, um, people, when they mention the thing of how it's in comparison about the same as other groups, or at least Caucasians, aren't mentioning the fact that it's still a minority group that is exterminating itself by indulging in barbaric behavior, which is what these homicides are more often than not, unless one's protecting. So whatever, we can get into the semantics later on, but they're not expressing the bigger picture of this, which is self-preservation. And if you have to preserve, um, if the only way to preserve is by having them separated, I'll go for that in a heartbeat. It's like I said before, one of the reasons I don't associate with loads and loads of people is because I know that the more people you know, the more drama you have, and the more headaches you acquire. So that's just my position. Um, And again, if I can get around to it, I'll put out that document, and it'll have my stances and various belief systems intertwined. But this is something that I think can be solved. It just takes patience, um, time, and finances. And I'd probably start some campaign as far as acquiring the funds to do it, uh, around the same time as dropping the actual statement. So, but yeah, to move over to another point, I want to also mention the still refusal people have when it comes to acknowledging political parties and their similarities. And it's really sad because a lot of times when we grow up, we're taught, certain things. Oh, the Democrats are for the common man, the Republicans are for the rich, yada yada yada. Um, I've mentioned before, both take corporate money. That's something that's just been thrown out. And I know a lot of you will start snoozing and going to sleep as I bring this up. But my reason for continuing to mention that is when people cast these votes during elections, whether it's presidential, at the state level, at the local level, they get this idea in their head that if you just put the opposing party in place, things will completely reverse themselves. And as a person who lives in a state that typically elects Democrats, California, the last Republican governor was Schwarzenegger, the Terminator, as all of you will know him, or most of you recall him as. And to this day, I cannot think of one difference between him and Brown, which substantially either improved or did something of noteworthiness in the lives of those just across the state. I've made the claim many times that they're taking the same money from the same groups, and also mentioned that the only things I can really give the Democrats credit for are net neutrality and gun control. And that's why when you have these shootings, I always try to say, look, I can't stand out either party because they're both, sucking off the nipple of the corporations. But the Democrats, at the very least, are a little bit more likely to give you some rhetoric accompanied with a law or bill that they're trying to make a law than the Republicans. We've seen in two instances Republican governors who had multiple shootings tear through their state in both Florida and Texas and not say a single word other than thoughts and prayers until one of them just broke the lid off the camel's back or broke the straw off the camel, whichever term is used. Yeah, I know I'm slipping up. I don't have my cue cards with me. Um, and I hate the fact that it has to come to that. But what people need to understand is that you're not being given a true choice between both parties. And the refusal to recognize that it's not necessarily the equivalent of the sticking your finger in your ear and saying, "Oh, I don't want to believe this." It has to do with the fact that a lot of us, when we're working a 9 to 5 job, and I've come to accept this, are not going to take the time and look up positions and platforms and what this person is claiming he or she is going to do. It took me a long time to recognize and realize that the majority of people will never pour the same amount of investment into election cycles as I do. And, actually looking up what these people are claiming themselves to be in favor of. So I've accepted it. It is what it is. Hopefully one day we can have people recognize the similarities. I'm not holding my breath. I've tried to make it clear here because a lot of times I'll say something opposed to Trump, and you've had people who don't even watch my stuff, do the little verbal filibuster in my comment section, and they'll say, "Oh, you're a Democrat," and I go, "No, I don't like Obama or any of the other recent ones either." And they'll say, "Oh, you're conservative." No, I don't. I'm not in favor of either party. I have positions that if one party espouses, I'll give it my endorsement on that one issue. So it is what it is. Envoy says, hopefully, yeah, we're all seeking that day, and it's hopeful reaching of us, but I wouldn't count on it. Um, then let's go over to the foreign matters. You have the Israeli-Palestinian conflict reaching a deadlier, I guess, portion. What was that? 2 weeks ago, when all of the various protesting Palestinians were shot by the Israeli border during the moving of during the moving of the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem after Trump recognized it as the capital. I find it funny how, and this is something that gets it annoys me. I have many Jewish people with whom I am familiar with and have good correspondence with, and some recognize the problem, other ones don't. So, what part of the smear campaign when it comes to criticizing Israel, which is run by the right wing government of Benjamin Netanyahu, and I'm going to tell you this: I don't care if you call this immoral. That is one man who, if I heard anything uh, fatalistic about, I would not be that sad. And one will say, "Oh, that's disgusting. Oh, that's horrible. How could you say that?" But to allow loads and loads of people to die because they have a separate ideology from yours, I think is it should be taken more seriously as gross. But that's how depraved the world is now. Where if you say something, it's on the level of doing something. That's why when you have me talking about the various actual problems with the African American community, you'll have people who come in here and get upset and want to start hurling childish insults as if we're at the third grade playground, as opposed to going after the various people that are actually causing harm to the community by killing its members, and in a lot of cases molesting its children. But again, I forgot we follow the doctrine of shh, be very very quiet. So a few of us understand. I think a lot of others do as well. They just are worried about offending those who are part of their group. And I like how after I said that, two people left. See, I like that. If a person is offended by what is being said, spare us the annoyance of writing out some comment that is, attempting to bemoan me, and just go. Which that was also another topic that was mentioned here. This insanity as relates to investing one's time and energy into people that it claims to despise. You won't believe many times if you go and look up, let's say, I don't know, a George W. or Obama speech, and you go into the comments section, you see someone talking about Obama was the worst president ever. George W. Well, they wouldn't be wrong about that the other one, but the point is they have very low opinions of these people, and yet they sit there and watch everything they're in. And I mentioned this earlier. I'm going to get off this topic, but you have people who claim they are opposed to my views, whether it's on the romance stuff we've talked about here a number of times, or what I believe to be the main issues that are afflicting African Americans. The main issues I think if they were resolved, they could prosper just about as well as any other group. Instead of going after the people who are preventing them from doing that, whether it's these pretty abysmal unions, the parents that aren't taking care of the children that they choose to birth, again, the child molesters, the various murderers, drug dealers. They'll ignore those in favor of going after someone who's merely speaking on those. That is absolutely insane. And anyone who thinks it's okay is I don't know how to help you, because one thing I realized in the past 2 or 3 months is that I can sit here and make a 40, 30-minute stream and say the same thing over and over again, because what I just said was kind of a slight repeat of what was said earlier about the problems that bother the community. And if someone writes a comment, being upset with that and still not getting it, I leave it there. Because if you can't recognize it as I speak to you and try to outline my position, there's nothing else I can do. And that's really a conclusion I've come to just in the last, in very recent time. That was one of the few things that's new about, I guess, this year, just the policy that is enacted on here. That I will no longer attempt to, have that same optimistic outlook when it comes to talking with a majority of those that comment. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that they're not actually there to listen to what you have to say, because I give you a fairly objective pattern of recognizing things. I tell you, for example, I criticized both the Democrats and Republicans, but I gave you examples where I thought they were different from each other as well. Even though I admit it, I still think it's a little bit. With that community I just mentioned, I gave you ways in which it was disadvantaged. I gave you ways in which it wasn't, and ways in which I thought it could be benefited. So this isn't just me criticizing someone for a half an hour while a basketball team worth of people check it out. It's intended to discuss the problem, espouse a view on what I think could fix the problem. And look, and again, the reason I take it the way it is, or at least push this in this position, is that most issues that afflict people, whether it be homicides, DUIs, car incidents in general, being fired from a job, they're all man-made problems. So when I talk about how, for example, if you want these children to have more prosperous lives, if you're a woman, don't open your legs up to males that are not committed to you. That way they'll have a lower rate of actually leaving before the child's born. It's something that the person who is engaging in that activity has to make for themselves. Envoy says it's hard for people to be objective since people are so wrapped up into their ethnicity, their age, their culture, their gender, their environment. It seems so. It's really sad that you have these people who just don't want to accept the fact that many of these problems that are impacting large groups are the direct result of decisions made by contemporaries. We can go into, what someone's dad did to them 50 years ago, but if I, as a person who's, in the case of the Vegas shooting, for example, all that focus was on his dad, the shooter's dad, because he was a career criminal. That was a man that was only a couple of years away from being 70. And I'm supposed to believe because his dad left when he was 10, that just derailed his life. We know it didn't because he was a successful college graduate and had, loads and loads of net worth. So it only goes so far, and you can only play that game for so long. Envoy says, no, a lot of like to make their bed and not lie, and that they want to have casual sex with men who are pieces of garbage and want the system to bail them out. Yeah, and it goes from them to their children. It's a cycle that feels like it will never end unless you do what I mentioned earlier, which is just get them away from each other. And I don't like the idea of exodus or pushing people away, but I'd rather that than because I guess I have this mentality that if you just give someone the right environment, they can prosper, as opposed to the claim of how genetics are the causes of everything we will be, and if you don't have the right genes, it's over. I don't like to believe that, even though it's sometimes it feels like it's true, man. And I get very scared when I think of that because I see a lot of people that I don't think are prepared for. I wouldn't have them in charge of a cardboard box, much less parenthood, but they're still able to be assigned this life-affecting role just for the simple fact they have the private parts to mass produce another individual's life. And one of the things I was trying to mention, I'm about to respond to Envoy, but one of the things I was trying to get at was the idea that when you have people who are historically battered by something, if you go into the newest generations of it and you look at just a decline, you'll notice it amongst immediate preceding generations. So, for example, let's say someone who was born in, I don't know, the late 1700s was an upstanding guy, and then you go look at his great 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 however many greats grandson in 2018, and he is robbing banks and holding up liquor stores. It's not the fact that the upstanding man in the 1700s had bad genes. It's the idea that he was that somewhere in between him and the newer model, there was a dysfunction, and it was something that happened only in recent times, more often than not, because you've already you've been given my example. Let me see if I can. Okay, Envoy says I have genuine sadness for women who were married to a man and then he ran away when they had children, or a man who lied to them. I don't feel sad in the slightest for women who sleep with men. Yeah, there are. Look, I'm not blaming all women for being single parents. I understand, and that's why I've had the stance I have with abortion. I absolutely deplore the circumstances behind having one, but I've recognized that the circumstances for having one vary person to person, and I will never be fully cognizant of every factor that goes into one being done. who deep down they know are a piece of garbage. I'm gonna say it on to Dirk. Envoy says, and they decide to procreate with them. Telling me, would you buy a faulty car that has a high chance of putting you in a car crash? I would say not. I don't think so. We're not doing that one. Uh, but they have what you're saying there implies logic, and I've seen so much emotion that I don't even. Sometimes I think I'm just in this one little small segment, and people who are call themselves recognizing my supposed superiority complex will say that this is you trying to um, exert yourself as better than everyone else. When in fact, I've mentioned repeatedly that if you put, at least in my opinion, my perspective, if you put multiple people in my circumstance as far as how they would go about doing things, I think they could have the same development and or um, chances. So I don't think I have one. I'm just saying. Uh, but one of the scarier parts of being in dark times is when people who are afflicted can't recognize it. You know, I tried to mention earlier how Trump's tax bill was awful, giving 83% of the growth to the wealthy. But I, am fully cognizant of the fact that wealth disparity did not change under Obama. And you have a lot of people now who they call themselves, um, it's being stuck in the matrix. It seems like it. But a lot of people will not recognize the fact that you have all of these circumstances, which can still be fought through. None of these bills are going to stop someone from necessarily getting a job, but there are stressors at the higher level that are having indiscriminate effects on local communities and people. When you start talking about the intricacies of economics and how they're being messed over by both parties in favor of the wealth and the or rather the upper class, they turn it off. That's why you just had the stream go from 8 to 6. They don't want to hear it, and that's one of the bigger frustrations I've had with, I guess, the new load of subs is that you have a group you have three groups. You have the political ones, which is very small. The ones who will kind of take a little bit of both, which is what Envoy and Dirk are, and then you have ones who just come here to talk about women and yada yada yada. And it's just after a while you say to yourself, how do you not recognize where all of this connects? There is a PC system that is being employed by media and commenters who call themselves being mainstream, the ones you see on television, and they have a few theories, and they're all the antithesis of what I've been preaching on here. One of them is that the Democrats and Republicans are different, which they're not, or at least they have small differences rather than large ones as is proposed on TV. That the main issue affecting African Americans is police brutality, when in reality it's not. It's them killing each other for starters. All of these children being born out of wedlock and thus having higher rates of meeting unfavorable results in life. 1 in 5 having a college degree by 25, when we live in a country where higher education gives a higher likelihood of being able to advance or move to another social class. Both of those are two things you're never going to hear on the media. You might hear a conservative say the second one, but that first one, you will never hear on Fox, on MSNBC, on CNN, none of these various networks. The third, as it relates to the women thing, is that it's still possible to have a relationship in the current era without me being met with almost tooth and nail opposition by the current woman. If you go on many of these places when they have these shootings, when they talk about, the guy was upset with women, they always make it seem as if, what a strange thing. I can't believe it. Now, it's a strange thing when someone goes out and commits, an act of violence, but they act as if it's not going on. There's not loads of guys who are having a problem with this. And one of the reasons I chose to speak more readily about it after kind of going, oh, I don't know if I want to talk about this, because when you have loads and loads of people who are saying, yeah, this is happening where I am, this is happening where I am. And they're coming from different countries. They're coming from other race groups. They're coming from different, political ideologies. You know, it's a load of just malarkey when people go on television. They talk about how, you know, the alt-right viewers have problems with women because of their misogyny and racism. When I told you before, go look up the Southern Manifesto. That was a document signed in the 50s by Southern members of Congress who were opposed to integration, something that many of you would consider racist. And if you look that document up and you look up its signers, if you look in their individual biographies, most were married. And look at any evil historical figure. Stalin had children. Hitler, for less than 2 days had a wife, longtime romantic partner. Just any quote unquote Bin Laden, they always have some woman that is willing to get with them and prove that ideological differences or quote unquote being on the wrong side of political views is irrelevant. Why do you think senators and congressmen from both parties who are supposedly different all have wives for the most part? Envoy says, yeah, they act like it's not connected. Men who go out there and target and want to kill them because of rejection, that's madness. But I tell you one thing, I do understand crimes of passion. Look, again, we're not making the case for doing it. What we're both saying is that there are multiple things which you are going to hear on this channel that you will never hear on television, or if you do, it will be in passing. There will be no attempt to actually look at the root causes of it. You're never going to see CNN air a special on the troubles that our young boys are dealing with when it comes to, women not reciprocating how they feel, because no one cares about males in contemporary society. We are the most expendable group of people that ever existed. Why do you think in all of these wars they would send all those boys out to get blown to pieces, and because someone has a vagina, oh, they can stay back home? Dwight, I think it's been proven multiple times. Look at the Jeremy Meeks thing. That's all I can say. That if having power is sitting up in jail, I don't know what power is. You don't need power. All you need is, in some cases, good looks. In some cases, there's just a variety of things that it depends on who it is. That's why I always get tired when I see the advice experts talking about, if you just work on this, if you just change that, if you just fix this, if you just switch that, if you just turn this, if you just move that, if you just push this, if you just sing that. Follow step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The women will come to you like a beehive. So I don't buy it. And again, we've seen that not turn out to be the case. Um, but yeah, I'm so tired of all these different problems, and it's so aggravating to sit here and on a day-to-day basis have to keep those inside. And you watch people who actively partake in it. I watch people who will sit here and watch establishment media and think the Democrats and Republicans are different. I watch people who sit here and think, oh, well, he's going to get a girlfriend eventually because that's just the way things are. Yeah, all of it is very aggravating. And part of what I liked about, or one of the motivations I had behind doing, these streams was that I wanted people who also had the same feelings to understand uh, that they were not alone in recognizing whatever problems that there were. And to have it, I guess what is so disturbing about the last few weeks is that in not considering myself someone that's notable, I've had these comments that are levied toward trying to insult me. And I always find it so disturbing that they have to scrape down the bottom of the barrel in terms of notability to come after me, because this can get to be a headache. It's one thing to have to sit there and try to find the time and way of articulating whatever the problem is and how you think it can be fixed and looking up the research and yada yada yada. But to have people then try to say, screw whatever is true. I mean, to give you an example, we had a guy who came on my channel and wrote that it is very rare for people who are the same age to be in a relationship together. I guess, doing his little old man, young girl thing. And I think I responded back to him, that's factually incorrect. There's no getting around that. Most people are within a year of each other when they're in a relationship. So again, it's stuff like that where people will write something and it'll be completely off. And then if I respond back or take the time to answer back, it's like they just don't want to hear it. Whatever bias they have trumps reality. A lot of the people who get upset about these police shootings get that upset because they're not seeing day to day the daily black on black shootings. If those were getting broadcast day after day, oh look at this young man's body splattered on the pavement, they would be upset because most of us don't like you know someone getting murdered. So it's because of again the media's grip over emotions rather than logic. A lot of people are not going to look up what the actual statistics are, and if someone reacts kind of like whatever to it after seeing it happen over and over again within their community by members of their community, you're going to have people who will get upset because they're not entrenched or are buying in, drinking the Kool-Aid of the establishment and the various forms of media that are out there that are promoting this idea. And it's scary because that thing I tell you about with the various shootings and the brutality is also being taken in by various liberal groups who call themselves being against establishment reporting on the affairs of local communities. You go watch TYT Secular Talk. They have a field day with promoting. Oh, this woman was abused by this man, and it took her 3,000 days to say something about. And oh, this all these blacks are getting killed by cops. It's not like it's happening in their community. And then in one instance, you even had one commentator say, so what? And people just won't recognize this, that you are effectively watching your own group be destroyed. Because see, it's easy to sit up there and nod with liberals and various other people and go, yeah, man, that's totally yeah. But in reality, you have many black children who are being born into impoverished states because their parents, if they have money, are spending it on something that is irrelevant, such as, we're not even going to go into that, but you get the idea, or something to put on their feet. A lot of them are being molested at young ages. We talk about the fact that they have so many incarcerations over violating the three strikes rule, some other drug offense, not non-violent crimes. There are loads and loads of issues that a lot of times these groups that call themselves being concerned with the plight of minorities only scrape the surface of. And I told you guys about when it comes to that sexual assault thing, the duplicity of that is that males who call themselves fighting against the patriarchy don't know what it's like to be alleged of continuing it unless they have that same shoe put on them. So, for example, let's say I was, one of them. I would say, "Oh yeah, I'm glad Cosby went to jail even without any actual, evidence. Yeah, great, ha 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 ha." And then, 30, 40 years later, you have someone coming forward talking about, "Oh, when I was 11, he did this to me when we were 13, when he was 13, and 2011." And you have people just automatically believe that. How am I? What? I am getting the retribution for taking the side of testimony as opposed to evidence and assuming guilty until proven innocent, which is how things are when it comes to these allegations that are being made. Yeah, envoy. Took the words right out of my mouth. Envoy says, "Power to me is the control you have over a group of people or the masses. Power, physical power, but not the power in traditional sense of finance, professionalized." Uh, yeah. So, also, to respond to Dwight, whether you agree with the example or not, I'm still speaking in reference to a majority of these allegations that have been made. So even if you can prove or say that he said something that corroborated their claim, show me the same for the rest. Again, if you can't understand where it is problematic to have loads and loads of women come forward years and in some cases decades after the fact, alleging something with no proof, as a majority of these cases are, I can't help you. Okay, so old school says we've been in dark times, but that's hard. But what's deeply concerning is that the media has now brought these things to light. The chaos been unleashed to a more severe level. Um, yeah, Envoy, that was you're on the money with your response to that. But again, people coming here to derail what's going on. I mean, I really don't understand how it's whatever. Like I said before, one of the mistakes I made was in trying to respond back in comments and actually give people the benefit of the doubt and think they were here to have a serious back and forth that wasn't just me and the other person insulting and yelling at each other. Well, Dwight, now that you can see it that they're doing Freeman wrong, understand that was the point of what I was saying, that you have a majority of these without any evidence being believed the day they're reported because, oh, historically women have been through so much. Imagine, and also think to yourself, and this goes back to that female, oh, they're so wonderful thing. Imagine to yourself what it would be like if I applied to anywhere, right? Let's say, I don't know, McDonald's, and they choose not to hire me for whatever reason. And I go, McDonald's isn't hiring me because of Brown versus Board of Education and Emmett Till and uh, Thurgood Marshall. You would think that's insane. You would say, wait a second, what are these cases that had to do with the admitted plight of African Americans have to do with you not getting hired for some job at a fast food restaurant? But see, as a male, you don't get that. Your ridiculousness is more likely to be taken as what it is, which is ridiculousness. If I were to use that argument, but the ridiculousness of saying we must now believe every or most of the women that come forward for the fact that in the past such abuses were allowed and nothing was said about it is completely just retarded to me. Like I said, go look at the Jew Wario claims. This man was dead for years, and then all of a sudden these women come forward alleging he was the guy who did it. In some series of papers where they're going after almost every member of the site he was on, and because they waited so long, uh, we couldn't do anything to him. A lot of them will say, "Oh, I was so scared." Remember, this is a guy that just made videos online. It's not like he was the mayor of their city or the governor, or what do they think his ghost was gonna be like Casper and put his hand under their shirt? I don't. It's just whatever. It all doesn't make sense. I told you people want to absolve response. They don't want to look themselves in the mirror and just say, maybe I wasn't good. Maybe I need to. We must stick in the man. Okay. Old school. I don't really know what that. You know, everyone has their own taste. So I don't know what to say to that. Whew. So if anyone else has anything else to add or put forth, speak now or forever hold your peace, at least until tomorrow. But I think we were able to talk about more things that have been afflicting us. This might be the final installment of this series, maybe, maybe not. It's just designed to say that there are a multitude of it's like a State of the Union speech. There are loads and loads of things which are directly and frequently impacting people. Is it where you upload or is it random? I mean, the streams are generally in the in either the morning or afternoon. Uh, yeah, I don't wear hoodies. So. I don't wear anything that doesn't have a collar on it. That should be clear by now. That's my swagger. The fact that people actually have commented about that is, I never go over that one comment where the guy said you wear awful clothing or something, and all you can see is the top half of. And that's the ridiculousness you have to deal with in comment sections just online. People write all kind of things that show their lack of ability to think with any cognizance. But if we went into undiagnosed mental disabilities, and their ability to just go and still have access to the internet, we'd be here all day. No, I have not. To respond to Maurice, it's very sad to sit here, and because I really believe that if people looked at these things the way I have, they would take themselves and not position themselves to do certain things. So, for example, a lot of times people will say there's a stereotypical view that's been established of um, groups because of whatever part of pop culture. In my opinion, you've had some of the more abrasive, members of the African American group demonstrate that type of behavior in videos that have been recorded, I hope unbeknownst to them, and put on World Star Hip Hop. Dwight says you can't take any criticism. I mean, I don't if you don't get where that wasn't a rational critique of a person to say something about my clothing and then only be able to see the top half of my shirt, which is what, 15%. I don't know what to tell you. Like I said, we can have whatever opinion we want. Um, and I've tried to make it clear, if there is dissatisfaction with my personality or with my perspective, free to leave. People act like YouTube just pushes the video into them or the stream, so it's always an option. Yeah, Envoy, I don't know what he means, and we'd probably be scratching our heads all day trying to figure that out. People literally will write anything online now. I mean, you can't even look up a video of the of Prescott Bush, the U.S. senator, the father of the older Bush and the grandfather of the younger one, without there being some allegations that he was involved with Nazi Germany and the World Bank and all the other nonsense. Literally, just anything that has his name in any interview that just has him speaking, automatically start talking about the supposed interactions he had with Germany at the time of its domination by Hitler. It was some of this stuff you just can't make up. Okay, everyone's gotten a little quiet. But yeah, I find it really interesting. And actually, if you go and look at most public figures, they don't respond to a bulk of the commentary that is put forth on their content. So, for example, if you go and write a letter to Trump or send him a tweet on Twitter, more often than not, he won't respond. I've tried to make this a platform in which people um, can have some level of acknowledgement and get their opinion heard by the person who's directing it or otherwise is speaking back to them in the same capacity. Oh, could you imagine if they did? They would be all hooked on antidepressants and whatnot. Yeah, because again, it can be being a public figure, and trying to just regularly talk about things can get to be a headache. I mean, if you look at the comment section of TYT, for example, they got to a point where they just don't care anymore. People were writing that after there's a video, for example, where they made fun of Cruz, the Texas senator, because his daughter didn't respond to him kissing her during the campaign trail. And they even say in the video it's just a little joke, funny, whatever. You have people in the comment section alleging that he's a child molester, and you say to yourself, how do the people in the comment section know this? But then the child, the rest of that man's family, and anyone else in any close capacity don't. But again, they'll take small instances of things that might be questionable and just speculate and have this open forum to say the most depraved, nastiest things about individuals. You know, I've been over the constant amount of people who will go and make fun of like the Barbara Bush thing, where you had that Fresno professor effectively dancing on her grave. And even though her comments were absurd, I thought the whole thing of just being happy by you know, someone's demise is dumb. We're all going to die. That's like me being very content with the fact that Envoy has used the bathroom at times. We all have to do that. Well, any of those inescapable fates, or that's like me saying, man, I'm really glad Maurice is over there having the right, having to do his taxes from working that job. Ha ha ha. It's dumb. And for the life of me, I couldn't understand why people wouldn't just say, you know what, that professor is doing something that's very, very not smart. Let's just leave her alone. And they had to go back and forth. They had to tell her, I'm so sick of what you're doing here. And for what? She still kept her job. She still, which I think she should have anyway, but she still has those same beliefs. It was a waste of time to engage her. It was a waste of time to try to speak directly to her. And in the end, all it did was just take up, news space and really bring some, that's the worst part about the just the Bush family in the last couple of months. That I mean, they've had the dumbest things either said or done to them. You have to remember, we're talking about a woman who, in her last months of life, had people alleging that her 90-plus-year-old husband, who was confined to a wheelchair, was supposedly grabbing women from the buttocks. This man in this wheelchair is he's like Super Saiyan 3 or something, grabbing these much more physically adept, you would think, much younger women by the behind. And this, they decide to allow this to go on for decades, and they want me to believe that the last three, no, out of the last five presidents, three of them have been supposed molesters or whatever. Which again, I can fully buy the Clinton ones. I can subscribe to the Trump ones. The others, not so much. Again, out of that group of five, if we just go back in history, we'll be here all day. some of the the slimy stuff that has been done by these commanders in chief. There's a lot of holidays and things that are named after people. I just realized that have the most questionable backgrounds and stances. And if people actually sat there and looked at um, what that person did, they would have mass protests to get them down. Like, you had this one senator who voted against the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, but because he supported the Space Center, they named it after him. And I don't see any protests to get his name removed from that. I don't see any, lobbying to get his stuff taken out. And I also think to myself, if someone is right on one issue, but they're wrong on many others or on another one as much, if not more, should we punish their correctness, because it's meant to commemorate him for being, a backer of the space program, that ultimately landed America, Armstrong on the moon. But should we completely diminish that person's role in history? Just like if one day I say, I'm going to make an Envoy a monitor, and then we go and find that Envoy said he hopes that, I don't know, some random person gets cancer. Am I going to now take him off and say, oh, all those times where he was, actually making sense with his arguments and doing things that were decent don't matter anymore? I think that'll be a really good debate for another stream. But also, I don't like taking those names off and doing that stuff anyway, because I think part of the purpose of having that stuff is to recognize there were times in history where certain views were more accepted at those times than currently. Being pro having various groups in you know states of confinement because of their ethnicity was more popular in previous centuries. Now you have to do it behind closed doors. Okay, so everybody kind of got quiet. I guess this is the conclusion of this part of the stream, or just of the stream in general. So I want to thank everyone who's participated. Left a mess on my Yeah. So uh, I appreciate those who came. I'll have something else tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed We Are in Dark Times too. I think this was much more productive and also showing of just what the problems are with how things are currently. Envoy asks, do are any other ideas for streams you have? Uh, I'll think about it. A lot of times it's just something, some news story or something that just happens, and then pop on the camera and speak. So there'll definitely be something else soon, and definitely by tomorrow, obviously. But I don't think of it. I don't have like a little paper where I say today's stream this, tomorrow's stream that. If that answers your question, but if you have a suggestion, you could always leave a private message or a comment. One of those two will suffice, and we can always debate whether or not certain topics are